The Navajo tale, The Story of the Emergence, is brought to you by Not a Prophet.org, the place on the internet to find spiritual guidance powered by artificial intelligence. Killing of the Great Bird. Next day he clothed himself in stone armor, and asked his mother and grandmother where he could find the Great Bird Tseh-nah-hahleh. And his mother told him that it was very dangerous to hunt the bird. Nayenezgani, however, started on his way, taking with him the skin of the doll, Clad, and the blood enclosed in the monster's stomach, and the earth shook as he went. The rainbow carried him towards the home of the Great Bird on top of Ship Rock. Before he reached it, he dressed himself in the skin of the doll, Clad, and he carried the monster's stomach full of blood inside his clothing. The Great Bird saw him coming, and flew towards him making much noise, flying over him 4 times. Then she caught up Nayenezgani in her claws, and carried him to Ship Rock, circling it 4 times, and then threw him down between the 2 peaks. Nayenezgani would have been killed by the fall, except for the fact that the feather which the Spider Woman had given him enabled him to fall slowly. When he lit on the rock, he tore open the stomach full of blood, and the Great Bird thought she had killed him, and so flew off the nest, telling her little ones to eat Nayenezgani as he was dead. Nayenezgani lay still, and the little birds came nearer to him, but he said "shh," and frightened them away. They called out to their mother, "Shema, mother, this human being is not dead, for he said "shh" to us." But the Great Bird said, "That is nonsense, go on and eat. The noise you heard was the sound of his fall." So the Great Bird flew away to the west over the mountains, and when she had gone, Nayenezgani got up and went to their nest and called the little birds to him. And they were frightened and went back to their nest and began to cry. Nayenezgani told them to be quiet, and that if they made a noise, he would kill them. The oldest bird came to him, and Nayenezgani took hold of him and pushed his beak down, and made his wings a different shape, and painted his wings and tail white, and told him to go south and live there and be good and not do any harm to anyone any more, and he became the first eagle. Nayenezgani called the smaller bird to him 4 times before he would come, and then Nayenezgani gave him a long pair of ears and told him that he was to be the owl, and that if he harmed the earth people he would kill him, and he sent him north to the La Plata Mountains to a place which was to be his home, called Nayenezgani, near Pagosa Peak. And the owl was very tired when he reached his new home. Nayenezgani looked about to find a place in which to hide so that he could kill the parent birds, but the only place he could find was in the nest, and so he hid there. Then the male rain started, and he saw the father bird flying back with something in his claws, and when he came nearer, Nayenezgani saw that he was carrying a handsome young man who was dressed in fine jewelry and many bracelets, and the bird dropped the man, and when he fell, the turquoise jewelry flew in every direction. The father bird then lit on the peak, but before he folded his wings, Nayenezgani shot him, and saw that the young man whom the bird had dropped on the peak was a Taos Indian. From the west began a light female rain, and the mother bird flew in, carrying a young and pretty girl dressed in white shell beads. And she dropped the girl on the rock. Just as the mother bird lit on the peak, Nayenezgani shot her with a lightning arrow, and the bird fell dead from the peak. Nayenezgani now looked about to find a way down from the peak, and below he saw a bat whose name was Jobani, Essen Batwoman, and he said to her, "Grandmother, help me down, and I will give you a feather." She hid 4 times and would not answer. Finally she told him to go to the other side of the peak, and then she appeared to Nayenezgani with a basket on her back, upheld by spider webs. She danced about when she reached the top of the peak, and said to him, "Now get into my basket." But Nayenezgani answered, "The strings are too small, they will break under my weight." But she said, "No, I can carry very heavy load with these webs." Nayenezgani was afraid, and would not get into the basket, so the Batwoman told him to fill it with big rocks, and he did so, and the strings of the spider web still held, although they buzzed with the strain. Nayenezgani was convinced that the Batwoman could carry him, and he took the stones out of the basket, and went over to the edge of the peak, and got into the basket. The Batwoman told him to shut his eyes, and she began to go down. Halfway down, the Batwoman stopped on a small ledge, and walked back and forth, while Nayenezgani wondered whether they were on the ground or not, but he could not see, as she had told him to keep his eyes shut. He grew so nervous that he opened his eyes, and at once they both fell to the ground. But fortunately the shelf on which they had been was not far up the cliff. The Bat Woman was so angry that she struck Nayenezgani with a cane she held in her hand, because he had opened his eyes. Then he got out of the basket, and went to where the great bird had fallen. He pulled out 12 of his tail feathers, doing the same to the female bird, and he scalped both birds with his stone knife, and told the Bat Woman to help herself to the feathers that remained. And she filled her basket with small feathers. Nayenezgani warned her not to go through the sunflower place, as she would regret it, and he set off towards home, but as he went, he watched the Bat Woman because he saw she was going straight to the sunflower place. When she reached there, all the feathers in the basket blew out, and she lost them all. She went back to find the dead birds again, thinking that she would find more feathers, but Nayenezgani did not wait to see if she got any. He mounted his rainbow and went home, where his return was celebrated in the same way as it had been before. Destruction of the Kicking Rock. Next day after breakfast, having found out from his mother where he should go, he started off to say, delicately the rock that kicks people into the river. He saw a man lying on his back with his head on a bluff and his feet near the river, and he was pulling the whiskers out of his chin. When Nayenezgani tried to pass, he kicked at him, and Nayenezgani said, "What is the matter, Sech, hi grandfather?" The rock man said, "My leg was cramped, and I had to kick to straighten it out." 4 times he was questioned, and he answered 4 times. After that, Nayenezgani took his stone knife and hit the rock man on the head, and cut through his breast, hips, and legs, chopping him into 4 pieces, and then scalping him. The rock man's children lived in the river, and Nayenezgani threw the pieces of the rock man down to them, and heard them quarreling for the pieces of meat, saying, "That is my piece," not knowing that they were eating their own father. Then Nayenezgani went down into the river and killed all the children except 2. One was called Kotsan Alligator, and Nayenezgani said to him, "You must never hurt anyone again. Will you promise this?" And the alligator answered, "I am not sure." Nayenezgani asked this 4 times, but the alligator would not promise. The other child who was spared was called Sistile Turtle, and was told to be good in the future, as he would be used for medicine by men, and his shell would be used to drink out of and also to make medicine in, and the turtle agreed to this, and said that he would always be good. So Nayenezgani went home on the rainbow, and they danced and celebrated his return as before. Destruction of Rolling Rock. The next morning Nayenezgani asked where he would find Tseh-nah-hahleh the Rolling Rock, and his mother told him that it was in the Jemez Mountains, so he went there and looked at it from a peak near by. When Nayenezgani tried to approach it, the rock began to roll towards him, and he shot his lightning arrow at the rock from the east, but could not hit it, and the rock then rolled back to its den. Then Nayenezgani shot at it from the south, and managed to knock a little splinter from it while the rock pursued him. He then approached the rock from the west, and the same thing happened, and also from the north, and at the end he only managed to knock off a few pieces and could not injure it, and meanwhile it kept chasing him while he was barely able to avoid it. At his home at Huafano the magic Katan began to burn very brightly, which showed that Nayenezgani was in great danger. So they sent hail, big rain, and cyclones to attack the rock. And the water soaked it, and Hashishjan burnt it with his fire, and then hit it with a stone knife, and large pieces were broken off it. The rock tried to escape them, but they chased it into a mountain from which it burst out as though from a volcano, and finally they chased the rock 4 times around the earth, while it grew smaller and smaller, until at last it fell into the Grand Canyon, where it now is. After taking its scalp, the 3 went home, Nayenezgani and Hashishjan, with Malai Shishi, spirit of the scalp. Destruction of Staring Eyes that kill. The next hunting by Nayenezgani was of the monsters called Benin, Yaruni Staring Eyes that kill, who lived at Silth, Lashi Red Mountain. Ashinesan, the salt woman, brought Nayenezgani a lump of salt, and told him how to use it in killing these monsters. And she told him to take his fire sticks also. As he came near where the Staring Eyes that kill lived, he found a great many of their tracks, and followed them to where they lived in a cave, and they all stared at him, never closing their eyes. Nayenezgani made a fire with his fire sticks and threw a handful of salt into the fire, which exploded into the monsters' eyes, blinding them, and they had to shut their eyes to rub the salt and fire out of them. Then Nayenezgani took his stone knife and killed them all, except two, which crept into a little crack in the wall of the cave. One of these he made into a screech owl, Glautra, and the other he called Naz, Ani, Snowbug. He told both of these never to harm people any more, and they agreed, and he sent the screech owl to the prairies, where he was to live in a hollow in the ground. And he sent the Snowbug to travel on the snow in the winter forever. Then he went home again, and they celebrated in the same way, with dancing and song. He told them how he had killed all of the staring eyes that kill. Every time he returned home, he hung the scalps of the monsters he had killed on the scalp stick. Destruction of Great Centipedes. After breakfast the next morning, he started out to kill the Hashitso Great Centipedes, and they told him that they lived at a place called Egleen Water Meeting Place on the La Plotter River near Farmington. So he went there and found a lot of centipedes who, as they walked, bowed themselves up in the middle, and then could spring a great distance to catch their victims. The largest centipede jumped at Nayenezgani, but could not bite through the stone armor, and Nayenezgani seized his stone knife and cut him into little pieces, and then killed all the rest of them, and their little ones except a pair, a male and a female, and these he let go, telling them to behave themselves and never harm anyone. He scalped the largest centipede and went home, where he hung the scalp on the scalp stick, and they held the usual celebration. Destruction of crushing rocks. The next morning he went to Chusto, Boad, south of Taos, where he wanted to destroy the crushing rocks, kindly. And he rode on his rainbow and took with him the horns of the Dalil, Kede. When the rocks tried to crush him, he would evade them on his rainbow, and the rocks could not crush him. He did this 4 times, and then he took the horns of the Dalil, Kede, and put them across between the rocks which prevented them from coming together. He then threw his fire between the rocks, and heated them so hot that when he hit them with his stone knife, they splintered into many pieces. Before he left, he motioned toward the splintered rocks and said, "Hereafter you will be used for the colored sands, of which our sand paintings will be made." And this colored rock, which Nayenezgani burned, is what the Indians now use for their paintings. Then he went home and was received with rejoicing. Destruction of cutting reeds and other monsters. The next morning after breakfast he went to destroy the cutting reeds, Lukadijij, which were at Tyalth, a round peak west of Taos. He took with him his fire sticks, and when he came to the little canyon where the reeds lived, he pretended to enter on one of the many trails, and the reeds tried to catch him, waving and clashing together, but 4 times they missed him. When he tried to cut the reeds down with his stone knife, he found it was impossible. So he used his fire sticks and burned them all up except 2. These he cautioned to be good in the future, and he told them that the earth people would use them in their ceremonies. The 2 reeds agreed to this, and Nayenezgani took the scalp from the largest reed, and went home and told his mother that he had burned all the cutting reeds, and then they celebrated. Then he went to destroy the canyon that spreads apart, which is also near Taos. 4 times he avoided being dropped into the canyon as it spread, and then he put 4 obsidian stones across it, and fastened them together to hold the canyon steady. He told the canyon that it must be good and not engulf people, and that the earth people would use it in their ceremonies. And the Indians pray now to this canyon. He then went home, and they celebrated as before. The next day he went to destroy the cactus that catches Hushent, Sawetso, which grew at near Cangelan. And he destroyed the cactus with his stone knife, and burned all except the little ones which he preserved. And he told them to be good, and that they would be used in the ceremonies. Then he went home to his mother. Next he went to kill the bad rock swallows, and Kiji, who lived near the Mancos River in one of the canyons near Mesa Verde. When Nayenezgani went into this canyon, the birds swooped down on him, and he shot his lightning arrows at them, but could not hit them, as they flew too quickly. Then they tried to hurt him, but his stone armor protected him, At home at Huafano, the magic Katon began to burn brightly, warning Tobakiskin. And he blew 4 times toward his brother, and the cyclones, hail, thunder, and also the white cloud on which Tobakiskin usually rode, all went to help Nayenezgani. Meanwhile Nayenezgani was running from the birds, who followed him in clouds like a swarm of bees. Then rain came from the white cloud, and the cyclones swept the birds aside, and the hailstones struck them, so all were killed, except 2 little ones. Nayenezgani told these 2 little birds to be good and do no harm, and the birds promised to do so. So the god let them live in the canyon peacefully. Then Nayenezgani went home, and they celebrated. Next Nayenezgani went to find the bears, that trail, Shush, Nok-ha-hai. There were 4 of these bears, and they lived on a mountain called Tilthent, Sa, near the Blanco River, about 4 miles east of Farmington. When the god came there and went up the mountain, he met a strange-looking girl named Shikin, Shush, not Il a Changing-Bear-Maiden, who had red eyes, and carried a basket full of berries on her back. Nayenezgani asked her where she came from, and she replied, "I have been picking berries in the canyon, and there are many still there." Nayenezgani went on, and suddenly he saw the bears coming towards him in single file. He immediately mounted his rainbow and rose into the air, and when he had gone up about 15 feet, the bears rushed under him, trying to grasp his shadow. Nayenezgani then took his lightning arrows and killed them all. The girl he had met on the way was a bear in human form, and now she appeared coming up the canyon in her bear form, and Nayenezgani killed her also. He then scalped the 4 bears, but not the girl bear. He dragged her down the canyon to a big piñon tree, and spread her arms and legs far apart, put his head down close to hers, and said, "I will bring you back to life if you will promise not to harm people any more." The bear maiden did not answer, but Nayenezgani blew 4 times on her head, and suddenly she came to life, sprang up, and ran away to the mountains. Then Nayenezgani went home, and they celebrated as before. After that he asked his mother if there were any more monsters to be killed, and she answered, "No, you have killed them all, there are no more left." Nayenezgani was not sure that this was true, so he started out and visited all the mountains in the east looking for monsters, but he found none, and after that he went to the mountains of the south, west and north, but found no more monsters to kill, so he came home again. One evening after this, while sitting outside his hagan, he saw a great red light to the north, and this made him angry, and he said to the people, "You said there were no more monsters to kill. There must be some over there." And he brought the people out of the hagan, and they all saw the red light. Nayenezgani then took a forked stick and stuck it in the ground and aimed it at the fire, so that in the morning he would be able to tell where the fire was. The next day he looked along the stick, and marked the place on the distant mountain to which the stick pointed before starting out, and then he mounted his rainbow and went there. The place where the fire had been was at the La Plata River, and Nayenezgani found there an old woman, San, who was old age. She was sleeping near a fire, while on the other side of the fire slept a black man, Bayeth, which means lazy man or sleepy, men of no account. Nayenezgani raised his stone knife to kill the woman, but as he did so, he fell asleep, and dropped down on the ground next to her. The old woman waked up when he fell and said, "What is the matter? Why do you try to kill me, grandson?" And then she waked up Nayenezgani. Other people now came towards them. They were Yob body lice, Dechin hunger, Tayan thinness, and Otsalan lies. Old age begged Nayenezgani to spare her. She said she would hurt no one, and that some people would love to be as old as she was. Bayeth, or sleepiness, also begged Nayenezgani not to kill him, as sleep is always good for people. Ya, body lice, also begged for mercy, and said, "I am good-natured, let me go." Tayan, thinness, begged for his life, and said, "Thinness usually hurts no one." Dechini, hunger, begged for mercy, saying, "If you starve a little, you enjoy your food much more afterwards." So Nayenezgani let them all go free, and he told the 4 hunger, lice, thinness, and sleepiness to go and stay at Tsedaco, 9 miles north of Farmington, and old age and lies were to go to a place 15 miles east of Pueblo Benito, named Yath, Pi. Then Nayenezgani went home again, as there were some Yetso, Lapai grey giants, wandering about. And Nayenezgani surrounded them, and left them at the spring of Tichat, near Huafano, and turned them into stones. Bigachiti came down again from heaven, and they told him about the killing of the monsters, and he was very glad, and said to them, I will be back in 12 days, and we will have a council. Plans for flood and recreation. At the end of 12 days, Hashjishjin, the fire god, and all the gods came, and they held a council in the Hogan called Hadonistin Mirage. The twins sat on one side of the Hogan, and the gods on the other, and the gods talked very softly, as they did not want the twins to hear them. They were talking of making more mountains, and of fastening the mountains together with metal nails. The boys grew tired of hearing the whispering of the gods, and wanted to know what they were talking about, and asked them to talk out loud so that they could hear. Their mother said to them, We were talking of strengthening the mountains and putting them in good condition, and we are planning another flood to wash away all the old plants and trees, and of planting new ones, and of fastening the mountains down with metal, so that they will not be washed away in the flood. She said that the gods were glad that the bad monsters were killed, and that they wanted to cleanse and recreate the world, and the twins agreed that this should be done. So they began to fasten the mountains down with lead, gold, and so forth, and they worked 7 days strengthening the mountains. Each mountain was strengthened and made in small size, but when Bigachiti used the Ethkena, Ashi, and blew at the mountains 4 times, they grew bigger and better than they were before. Then they killed all the trees because they thought them bad, and Bigachiti said that after 7 days it would begin to rain. And all the gods went into the big bamboo flute again, and the rain began and kept on for 42 days, and water covered the whole earth, except the tops of the mountains. When it stopped, a great rainbow appeared over the world, and on top of it stood Bigachiti with his hands spread out in gladness. The water covered the world for 42 days, and then began to decrease and run off in different directions, leaving only mountains and rocks, and no plants or animals. The gods came back to Huafano Peak, where they had lived before, and Bigachiti waved his hands over the world, and at once it was covered with trees and plants and animals, and when it had rained a little, everything began to grow. The gods planted a little cornfield called Dajejal, Jishi, at Huafano. They also grew their squash, beans, and tobacco there. They named the mountains again, and also named some other places, Bej, Lashi, Bijij, Washington Pass over the Chuskai Mountains, Tsehatral, volcanic rocks near the foot of the pass over the Chuskai Mountains, also Sanso, La Mountain, which is near Crystal, New Mexico, Centile Flat Rock in Canyon de Chelly, also Nash Jate Seal, Spider Mountain or Peaked Rock in Canyon de Chelly, To Day, Hashgay on top of Black Mountain near Chin Lee, Adatensoi, Peak on Black Mountain, Not Deet, Seal Tobacco Mountain near Bluff City, Tsilth, K, Hajoni Beautiful Mountain north of Chuskai Mountain, Nayenezgani, Crown Point, Size, Kit Cedar, Covered Flat, Topped Rock near Ojo Alamo. They visited these places as they named them, and then went back to Huafano. Then they met again in the Hogan for a council, with the boys sitting on one side and the gods on the other, as before. And as before the twins could not hear, and asked after a time what the gods were talking about. Their mother said, We are planning to make more people to fill this fine new world. And the boys were very glad to hear this. They discussed how the people were to be made, and decided to make the men of turquoise and white corn, and the women of white shell and yellow corn, and the corn pollen would be for the male, and the corn bug for the female. The gods took these 6 things, and turned them into 3 men and 3 women. Bigachiti said, I am going to a place called Sis, Natil, which is near Kim, Bito where Cade, Estijai the man, Raptiner rainbow lives, and I am going to plan to make animals there, and I shall make the donkey first, Tehelth, Sapai, which means dusty beast because he is always rolling in ashes, then the sheep, then the horses, and after that all sorts of animals. And Bigachiti laughed as he was planning these animals, and he kept going back and forth between Tseh-nah, Ginny, which was his home, and the council, creation of man and animals, Then they began to make man. They made his feet and his toe nails, and his ankles of soil of the earth, his legs of lightning, his knees of white shell, and his body of white corn and yellow corn. His veins were of striped corn and blue corn. The calico corn made the hair on his arms and body. The black corn made his eyebrows, and the red corn was his blood. His heart was of obsidian, and his breath was the white wind. His ear was made of white shell, and the eardrum of mica. They took all the flesh of all the different animals to make his body, and also all other kinds of flower pollen. They made him of all kinds of water, rains, springs, lakes, rivers, and ponds, also of the black cloud, and the male rain, and the sky, and the female rain, and they made his arms of the rainbow. His hair was made of darkness, his skull of sun, his whiskers of darkness, and his face of daybreak. His nose was made of lashy red beads, his eyes of the suns, his teeth of white corn, and his speech of thunder, his tongue of straight lightning, and the little whirlwind was what kept his nerves moving. The movement of his finger was the air, his saliva was the little rain, and the water of his nose and his tears were the medium rain, and his food was of white and yellow corn. And the name of the new kind of human being was Analthton, Nalia meaning created, from everything. The people who had been in the cave were called Hujinadine, which means the people who came up. Hashjalt, I talking god, was the first to be made, then Hash Hugon house god, next Natan, Lakai, Eshki white corn boy, then Natans soy, aided yellow corn girl, then Tradidineshki corn pollen boy, then Tradidin, aided corn pollen girl, Sahanarieshki, the Holy Spirit boy, and Bike Hajan, aided Holy Spirit girl. These were the first human beings made on this earth of the substance of the universe, which already was full of the Holy Spirit. They made animals, and the donkey was made first of a substance called Nihopa, and his hoofs were made of obsidian. This is the way they made men and creatures. They put everything which was used to make man laid out in pairs, in a line on the robe of daybreak, at the south, west, and north sides of the Hagan, and covered them with a buckskin. And the pair on the north side was covered with a rainbow, as well as a buckskin. At the east side were the Yea gods. The spirit of Tseh-nah-hahleh mountain motioned with a rainbow over all the human beings, and the spirit of Tsalt, Silth mountain, motioned over them with the sunlight, and they sang all night over the people and blessed them with the light and the rainbow. And towards daybreak they took medicine and herbs and sprinkled over the human beings, and then the Yea motioned over them with Ethkina, Ashi, and power came to them, and they were shaken with it. The gods gave strong power to the people, and covered them with flowers, and also they covered the new animals with plants and grasses. And then all the gods spoke, and told the people 4 times to rise. That day had come. Then the Yea took off the buckskins, which had covered the people and the animals, and Hagan, house god, gave his cry, Aho, ah-ho. And the Yea's spirits went in the 4 directions into the 4 holy mountains. And when the spirits entered the north mountain, the bird spirits went with them. The 4 mountains were called Sis-na-Jini, Salt, Silth, Dugo, Slied, and Debayant, Sa. If people do not believe that the Yea spirits are in these mountains and keep them holy, sickness and disease will come to afflict the people. For the Yeas control sickness, and that is the reason why the Indians are not healthy now, because at the ceremonies they do not take these things seriously. Then the newly made people, Analthton, Naolia, arose, and the gods motioned towards them with the Ethkane, Ashi, and the new people spoke, saying, Shema mother, Leche father. For they saw Begachidi and called him father, and they called Estzin, Atilahe their mother. Then the new people ate some white corn, for although they were made of corn, it was good for them to eat it. And the Navajos live on corn today. First song of the Hagan. This ends the creating of human beings and creatures, and Begachidi was glad and laughing when he had finished the creation. Asterisk, and he made the new people run races around the world, and the animals raced too, and the donkey won, for Begachidi loved him most, and the mule came in second. They then made a Hagan for the new people, and at present the Hagan song, Haganbayan, is sung just after sundown for thanksgiving and as a prayer. Nata Haganbayan is said. After this, Begachidi turned all the animals loose to wander as they pleased, but the donkey was kept for his own use. And he said to the animals, Some day I will come back and need you, but now you can wander as you please. There were a great many songs sung while He was making the animals, and there are so many of these songs that today very often not all of the songs are sung in one night's ceremony. They gathered for another council in the Hogan, and again the gods spoke so low that Nayenezgani and his brother, Tobakiskin, could not hear what they said, and the twins asked the gods to speak so that they could understand them, and the gods answered, "We were talking about the creating of animals and human beings, and how you killed the monsters. Now we are planning to go and get the people Hajinadine who are living in the cave." Nayenezgani said, "That is well." Then they made a great rainbow shaped like a basin, and they all mounted this and went to the cave. They asked Nayenezgani and his brother to go, but Tseh-nah-hahleh the coyote stayed behind as he did not care to go, and the other gods did not urge him. While the gods were gone on the journey to the cave, the coyote made some little coyotes of his own, a white one from the east, a yellow one from the west, which was a female, a blue one from the south, which was a male, and a black coyote from the north, which was a female, and each pair stood nose to nose. And he also made a dog which stood with the female black coyote. The names of these coyotes were: the east Kayoth, Kathteen Agusai, which means turning in the daybreak; west Nahatsoin Nago Sai, which means turning in the afterglow; south Chadadoth Dani Gosai, which means turning in the darkness, and the name of the dog was Dabani, Des Daha, or trailing dog. Tseh-nah-hahleh also made some crazy coyotes. If one of these should bite a human being, he would probably go mad. And also he made some mad dogs whose bites would bring madness. Tseh-nah-hahleh made these creatures because he did not know how to behave, and no one was there to know what he was doing. And though Bigachidi knew what the coyote was doing, he was willing that these animals should be made. Return of created beings from cave. Meanwhile the gods reached the cave, and they had to use ladders to reach down to the Hajinadine or Emergence people and bring them up to the surface of the earth. So the people came out onto this earth, and were very glad to leave the cave, as they had been there a long time, and had been much worried about what was going to become of them. The little ants were the first to come out, and the turkey people were the last, and Hashishjan, the fire god, counted them as they came out. The gods told them that they had made a beautiful world, and that it was quite safe, and they answered, "We are glad." Bigachidi then said to the gods that all people in the future should have different languages, and the gods agreed to this. They divided all the clothing so that each people should have a certain share, and the beasts also could choose which tribe they should join. The Navajos took the best seed of the corn, while the Pueblos and Zuni took the poorer seeds. The birds chose their tribes, but only the turkey people chose to go with the Navajos. Estsan at Ilehe, the changing woman, took the turkeys and held them in her arms. Bigachidi and the gods said to the people, "You are all going to have different languages now, live differently, and do your hair in different ways." The Navajos did their hair in a queue, and the other tribes cut their hair across the front, and this is the way they do it to this day. They told the birds how they were to live and build their nests, and they all agreed to do as they were told. Then Bigachidi told the people how they were to worship. They must keep the prayer stick, or ceremonial catons, holy, and they must place pollen and flint and shell beads and turquoise and medicine near the catons when they pray, and Bigachidi will hear them and answer their prayers. Separation of people into clans. Bigachidi said to the plants and the trees, "You must grow and blossom and bear fruit at certain seasons." And they agreed to do this. Then he said to all creatures, "After 4 days you can go wherever you please." And when that time was ended, Bigachidi blew 4 times in different directions, and some of the Navajos went towards Huafano, and some went to a place called Nayenezgani, the black place, and some to Kia, the standing up place near Crown Point. And the people who were last to be made, the Analftan, Nolia, went to live near Huafano, and never went far away from it. This clan family was then named Silth bin Jadathi, which means wandering around the mountain. They are now called the Ashin or Salt clan. They made a ceremonial Hagon in which the god told stories of the third world, and this story and the songs of the creation were handed down from these chieftains to the people, and then from one generation to another, and so it has been handed down to this day. Nayenezgani was made the commander of the earth as Bigachidi was in heaven. They learned the Ye ceremony Tserad and Dene at this time. To make the 4 chiefs holy, they put earth from all the holy mountains into their shoes, and they put rock crystals into their mouths, so as to make all that they said true. After a time, the Salt clan, Ashin, increased and spread to other places where they made homes, and these made the different clans which now exist. And the people who stayed at Huafano are called Hagan clan. Bigachidi told the people, as I have made each clan and each building, I have made for each a different spirit, and I laughed as I made them. And then Bigachidi made 2 other spirits known as Bigo, Guinea and Bigote. So, and these no one has seen. The son said to Estsanat-hahleh, I want you to go to a place in the west where I can visit you now and then. And she said she was willing to go. The son told her to tell the gods that she was going and find out whether they would agree. So she asked them, and they said, No, we will go to the west, but you must go to the east. And she told the son what they had said, but he answered, No, let the others go east. Everything is lovely in that direction, but you must go west to the island Santa Cruz off the coast of Santa Barbara, California. And the son told her this 4 times and said, Even if the gods do not want you to go to the island, you must go. And certain gods of the Yea will go with you and 12 other people. And I will send guards for you, the hail, thunder, lightning, rain, and the water monster, a journey of Estsanat-hahleh to the west. Then the son sent his messenger, Tonalai, the dragonfly, to tell Bigachidi to come down to them. And he came, and they told him about this dispute, and asked him what they should do. Then Bigachidi answered, That is well, Estsanat-hahleh must go to the island. Bigachidi spoke to the other gods about it, and the other gods said, No, we wish to go. Let Estsanat-hahleh stay here. The coyote at Tseh-nah-hahleh said, I will take some of the last people made Analfton, Naolya, and a dog, and we will go north. So he went north with a man, a woman, and 2 dogs, and these people never came back. They are now called Nayenezgani, Eskimo.